All right, so this one might seem like a bizarre pairing, but I feel like not too much once we get down to it. Because the thing that happened was you actually brought up Orgazmo first, which makes sense because we've been batting around the idea of talking about the South Park movie or Team America or whatever, and we did basketball recently. So you brought it up because I think you had watched it recently,
Hmm.
and you were wondering what could go with it, and we all went in different directions. You went the comedic superhero route because you were going in sort of the direction of super.
Hmm.
And then when I started thinking about what could go with it, my first thought went to what other comedies are there about porn?
Hmm.
And then it was like, or we could go the Trey Parker route and do like cannibal. I'm dying to talk about cannibal at some point.
Hmm.
And so I looked it up. And so it was like,
Did
what?
did Zach and Mary make a porno ever come up in our conversation?
No, I don't believe it did. I keep forgetting it exists.
Because I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix too.
So I Googled what are movies like Orgasmo, and you went the comedic superhero route. I went the comedic porn route. We talked about the Trey Parker route, and then of course Google went the making a low budget movie route,
Hmm.
and that was one of the first things there. Bowfinger was, and it's like, well, we've been looking for any excuse to talk about Bowfinger. Let,
Hmm.
let's take this opportunity. And I feel like the way we can kind of talk about how they compare and contrast, because they're very different,
Yeah.
is that with Bowfinger, I feel like a lot of the comedy comes from like being clever and witty,
Hmm.
and Orgasmo goes the let's be as fucking dumb and stupid as possible.
Hmm.
It's like two totally different but popular approaches to comedy, and we'll see if they can make these work and how sometimes being clever might work more and maybe possibly sometimes being stupid might work more given the circumstance. So
Hmm.
see what we come up with. But even though it came out the year after Orgasm, I think I want to start with Bowfinger actually.
Okay.
So
You're just itching to talk about Bowfinger, especially one character in particular.
yes, do you remember seeing this in the theater?
Yeah, actually, I do.
And I would have been probably 8 or 9. I can't remember if it came out like in the summer or when it was or in the fall. But
Hmm.
it's one of those movies that I liked when I saw it because of just the general comedic moments in it.
Hmm.
And Eddie Murphy's performance is very universal,
Hmm.
both of them. But obviously, it was a movie that I didn't really appreciate until later, with all of the like industry in jokes and the whole thing about how this was Steve Martin just doing a whole scathing sort of observation when it comes to movie making in general, and just how many clever moments there are in it, and jokes in regards to all the different professions in and of themselves that come with the territory.
Hmm.
It's really, as far as like movies that take jabs at Hollywood go, this to me is towards the top.
Hmm.
And I've talked about before how underrated of a comedic director Frank Oz is, which sounds like I'm using the word underrated wrong because obviously Frank Oz is a very beloved comedic director. But when I say underrated, I don't just mean he makes really good comedies or his movies are really funny. The comedies Frank Oz has directed are some of the funniest movies ever to me. Specifically, What About Bob, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and this. Do you have any general thoughts on Bowfinger before we kind of get into specifics?
I kind of had the same thought. Like when I first watched it, I was like, "Yeah, this is funny." But as I get older, it gets funnier.
Yeah. And I still feel like and I've seen this a lot. I've seen Bowfinger many times, but I feel like there's still jokes I'm like catching from time to time for the first time.
Hmm.
So I guess we can start with because we just very recently talked about the jerk and the man with two brains. Let's talk about just how much we were actually just talking about before we started how much of a blessing it is that Steve Martin wrote this movie.
Yeah.
Like I could see him playing Bowfinger anyway, but the fact that we got this movie because he wrote it makes it something special in and of itself. So it is.
It really shines too, which with Steve Martin, shock surprise, it's the same in all of his movies. Half of the comedy in this movie for him is just his delivery.
Yeah. And that's the great thing, dude, where it's like
I'm thinking about the scene with him and Heather Graham, where she talks about sleeping with someone else, and she's like, "Why does it matter?" And he's like, "You're right."
I think one of my personal favorites was when they are talking about the things that they both love when they're on their date.
Mm-hmm.
And she just says, "Oh, do you like smashing pumpkins?" It's like, "Are you kidding? I love to do that." And then he just goes into another thing without her even getting to react to that.
That's a classic Steve Martin route.
Yeah, there's so many. That's what I was going to talk about. Where it was like, it's a blessing that he wrote this because there's so many Steve Martin moments in it.
Mm. Speaking of Steve Martin and people that have done movies with him, just a little side note: did you see Rick Moranis is coming out of retirement?
Yes.
I'm excited for that.
I feel like we've been waiting for it for what, 20 years almost.
A while, yeah.
But there's still those little things in there, like the ponytail bit. Like it's, I mean, obviously it's the whole. There's a lot of fake aspects to his character.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's also like, I would never feel the ponytail joke was that necessary unless it was coming from Steve Martin.
Yeah.
But it's like, but I do love. There's so many of those little details that just show there's so many soulless characters in this.
Oh man, I just had a thought. We did the wrong thing with trying to find something to pair with Orgazmo. You said a couple weeks ago you've been thinking of a reason to talk about the producers. Bowfinger would have been perfect with the producers.
Yeah.
Damn.
We'll get there. We'll get to both versions of the producers, I assume, at some point. But like the whole sequence of him meeting Downey at the restaurant, that first time.
More like forcing his way into his life.
Yeah. And there's that moment where like you were saying, and we were talking about with the jerk man with two brains. And I talked about Dirty Rotten Scoundrels in the past.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many things Steve Martin has done in his movies that only he could pull off. Like, I feel like it would be over the top in delivery and execution in any other movie in anybody else's hands. The moment when he goes to shake Downey's hand and the ponytails in his hand.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have been overplayed by anybody else. But it's just this perfect moment of slight shock in trying to fix the situation.
I think another underrated moment from that scene is, the ponytail steals the show, especially for you. Because for you, it's the UHF mustache gag all over again. But I also think an underrated funny moment is just the fact that he's talking on a disconnected phone.
The best part is that Downey, he never notices that Downey notices.
Yeah.
He thinks that whole time that he got away. That's what sets the whole movie off is that he thinks he got away with that.
Yeah. And I love that they don't save it for, like, it could have been easy to save it for a reveal at the end, and he runs back to Downey, and he got what he wanted, and Downey's like, I don't even know who you are, I don't remember that, da-da-da-da. But I love how right in the beginning we nip it in the bud with Downey just being like, I don't know what the hell that was.
I love it, though. The last shot we get of Downey is when he's at the premiere and recognizes his car.
Yeah. Yeah, because after the restaurant, he goes away until then. No, well, we see him drop off the car.
Yeah. And he brings in again that like soullessness of like Hollywood and its producers, where they have a conversation that's pretty much happening in the background. Like you kind of have to listen for it when he's talking about how he was basically terrified of losing his car in the divorce. And then as they're walking away and the audio's fading out, you can hear him say, "So who got the kids in the divorce?" "Oh, she did. It doesn't matter."
Yeah.
It's like just little details like that are everywhere in this. And it's the kind of thing that it could have been so off-putting that so many of the characters are like that, especially Bowfinger himself being so soulless. But we even get the moment, though, when he starts to sympathize with Jeff, and he's like, of course we're this far into it, now I've got a conscience. It's like an annoyance to him that he has an epiphany.
He like scolds himself.
It's like, how perfect is that to have a character like that be the center of a movie like this? I really feel like you could not tell the story another way.
No.
It has to be from the perspective of a character like this, and the way that Steve Martin plays it, to where he's funnier the more soulless he is, instead of off-putting at something. Because you would think eventually he'd get off-putting or something, but that they stick with it. And that there's nobody really there the only person there to call him out on it is himself.
Yeah.
And he's annoyed when he has to do it. I guess the closest thing would be the actor guy. But even he's more concerned about Heather Graham, so it doesn't really matter too much.
Yeah.
Worth noting.
I love how when we first meet Heather Graham, she's like this innocent, just came off the bus person, and she ends up sleeping with like 4 people in the movie.
Yeah. It's like she knows, like, it's not that she falls into that and she's corrupted. She shows up all innocent, but already knows that's how she's going to do it.
Yeah. Which really makes the scene interesting when Steve Martin steals her credit card, because if you think she's innocent, it's like, oh man, that's really dirty. But once you figure out how she is, it's like, was it though?
Yeah, we're literally just watching them use each other.
Yeah.
And what's great is
they both realize it too.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it, is normally their date scene would be when the movie slows down. But it's like, it's one of the most comedically soulless scenes in the whole movie. It's perfect.
We were talking about Steve Martin's delivery. Another delivery that I love is when he's first talking about making the movie and he pulls out his money box. And like, you know, he could have easily been like, I have $10,000 or whatever. But he's like, he pulls out the box and he's telling the story. And he's like, and now I have $2,184 to make a movie.
And what's funny is, like, that's a funny joke in itself, but I also love the fact that that's basically him calling out, why are movies as expensive as they are?
Yeah.
And so much of that goes God knows where. And I also heard apparently there's another layer to that joke where it's like, when he's talking about his age, when he says like he's in his late 40s or something, and he goes all the way back to like 38. But if you add up the money as far as $1 a week, he's 52. Like, I love that that's a joke that's just in there that you have to figure out for yourself.
Yeah. It's usually found out more out of curiosity than anything.
Yeah, and that's why I love just how clever this is, because there's one joke in this movie that I love the start. There's one joke in this movie that got ruined, I think.
They got ruined?
And the only reason, it's a great joke, but the only reason it got ruined was because they overstated it. I feel like the only joke in this movie that is overstated to a fault is the plutonium. When he goes up to him and he's like, they're doing the movie supposedly, and he tells Kit Ramsey about the plutonium, and Kit just says, yeah, I've got plutonium, and he like explains why he has plutonium. He like throws them off, but it's like, the fact, it feels out of context that the dude, or out of like character, that the dude stops the scene to say to Kit as a person, you really have to vote, because he thinks that Kit's just responding in movie talk. It's weird that he responds to it, and then we get a second cut of Bowfinger saying he really has plutonium.
Yeah.
Like, just Kit explaining why he actually has plutonium is all that joke needed to do. Because we know the context of it's Kit speaking as Kit and not as Keith.
Mm-hmm. I've got a theory though as to how that joke can make a little more sense. Bowfinger would be surprised because he knows what's going on, but the actor guy might have just thought Kit went off script.
Yeah. Yeah, because I can't remember or not if there's like a specific moment where they explain to the actors Kit may not be working with the same script as them.
No, I don't think he ever reveals that.
But while we're on this topic, and obviously this will be getting us going in that direction, but how brilliant, how truly brilliant is Eddie Murphy in this movie as a whole?
He does play like all ends of the spectrum.
I think it's especially impressive because apparently he squeezed this movie in.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's literally like Kit in the movie itself. It's like they barely had Eddie Murphy because I think he was between Life and The Nutty Professor 2. He was like right between them, so they barely had time to put Eddie Murphy in this movie.
I think without Eddie Murphy, the movie wouldn't have worked as well.
Yeah, because before we go into one of the great comedic characters, let's talk about Eddie Murphy as Kit, which is amazing in itself, and maybe a bit overshadowed by how funny Jim is as a character. His performance as Kit is amazing. This scene when he's walking around with his agent is like peak Eddie Murphy, where he's like talking so fast and making joke after joke to the point that you can't even catch everything he's saying. It's like you can barely catch his F-bomb. It's like hidden in there.
Yeah.
It's like he's talking about some movie where he told Tommy Lee Jones, "Fuck y'all" or something. But it's like, I love the jokes, like, when he's, like I said, like everything feels like just a movie joke in general, which is like catnip for any movie fan. But it's like the moment when he's talking about, you're going to have an awesome moment in the movie where you push a guy named Cliff off of a cliff. And it's like, that's the big moment in like any stupid action movie. And Kit's response is, no, it's too cerebral for the audience. We're making a movie, not a film. I said that, and that whole scene is just, you can barely keep up with him. And it's amazing. So I was trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, the whole thing about Mindhead, which of course is a not so veiled depiction of something else. Obviously, Mindhead is Scientology, right?
I would guess so.
I guess they talk. There's so many different things they talk about. I think Bowfinger at one point actually calls it a cult.
Yeah, and at the end he teases calling it mindfuck.
And then there's the moment when that same moment at the end when they talk about the reason it matters to Terrence Stamp that they're blackmailing Kit is that Kit is pumping money into them.
Yeah.
Which is, what happened.
Which is also funny because we failed to mention this when we were talking about Bowfinger as a character. The way he gets his way is the dirtiest way ever.
And I love that doesn't come from out of nowhere. It is a running joke with a massive payoff.
Like, I feel like it's so funny that essentially throughout the movie, Oh, I hate to do that on camera. The only comeuppance that Bowfinger gets throughout the whole movie, I feel like, is the shitty premiere seats. Like, I feel like that's his. I could see it was worth it to have to wait for me to get through a yawn to say that.
No matter how many times I see this movie, that shot kills me. Because I've had to sit in that area before, and it fucking sucks. And he's so optimistic. Good. That shot.
And now every time you watch that scene, you'll think of it as a comeuppance.
It's his only dose of karma.
It is. And he doesn't even notice it.
It's actually a pretty good night for him. He looks pretty happy.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought up the seats.
And how could I not? And I love how, like, it's such a good night for him. Like, Jamie Kennedy doesn't even fight him on it.
Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, and another moment that I like as far as Kit goes is which I wonder if it's an in-joke or not. Is and this is one of the ones I didn't notice for a long time. But you'll notice that Universal is the distributor for Bowfinger.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the moment when Bowfinger's trying to trick him into reading Shelby Rain.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Oh yeah, I'm here. I've got a script from Paramount." And Kid's like, "No, I'm not expecting anything from Paramount." He's like, "Oh, I meant Universal." He's like, "Oh, well, all right." It's like, is that because Universal put this movie out?
Well, no, you just missed a joke there by misquoting what he says, because he's like Paramount, and Kit knows, oh, I'm not getting anything from Paramount. But then he brings Universal. Kit's response is, "Yeah, maybe." Like, like he knows it's not Paramount, but he hasn't ruled out that Universal sent something.
See, it's almost like every joke has a second layer,
Mm-hmm.
if not a third. So, yeah, and I wanted to, when we got into the Mindhead thing, I wanted to talk about how that's another place where I really appreciate Murphy's performance. Like, when I was younger, I always loved, one of the things he was terrified of is there's no giant foot trying to squash me.
Mm-hmm. And
I was always so taken by that line. There was so long of a period where I missed, if I feel like I might ignite, I probably won't. It's like his delivery of these is so perfect.
Yeah.
Because these are hilarious lines, but at the same time, he's playing Manic so well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. But yes, there is.
I love that of all these things, it's his affinity for the Laker girls that bites him in the ass.
It's like, it's the thing is, it's a joke that keeps coming back. But if you're watching it for the first time, do you really expect like a full-on payoff to it?
I think my favorite moment that it's referenced is completely nonverbal. It's when he runs into them on the side of the bus.
Yeah.
I think he just like screams or whatever. Like, I feel like whenever I have a way to sum this up. Whenever Kit Ramsey is being filmed, he is having constant Hank Hill freakout moments. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm not extremely familiar with the show, but I'm familiar enough to know what that is.
Yeah, I'm only referring to the noise.
I believe I've seen a compilation video of it. But as we have kept alluding to, there is a second half to this Eddie Murphy performance.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've laughed myself sick, and we haven't even gotten to Jif yet. Can I just say, I was so happy to read something. I believe this was IMDb's trivia. And it's probably one of my favorite pieces of trivia ever because it's something I suspected that I had always hoped was true, but I was never sure. And then it showed up on IMDb's trivia. And even though that's not always reliable, my immediate thought is that has to be true. I refuse to believe that is not true. I absolutely believe that is what happened. One of my favorite scenes in comedy ever is Jif's audition. It is such a great scene comedically that scene lasts for maybe 2 minutes tops, and it's the only time he looks the way he does on the cover and the poster.
Mm-hmm. And it was all over the trailers for the movie.
Yes. Do you know the glorious thing about Jif's audition that I just know in my heart and soul the true piece of trivia?
Did Eddie Murphy ad-lib the whole thing?
Yes. He did not know the question Steve Martin was going to ask him, and he ad-libbed the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And every answer he gives is gold. And it's everything. It's what he's saying. It's the way he says his lines as Jif. One line that just always kills. It's such a simple line and such a simple moment. And I am bent over, stomach hurting every time I see it, no matter how many times I see it. When Bowfinger asks him if he has any experience in the movie industry, and his response is, I'm an active renter at Blockbuster. I think it's the wording too. I'm an active renter at Blockbuster.
The only thing that sucks now is that joke's dated.
And then there's it's just such a classic dumb joke. It's interesting that it's ad-lib because it's very much a Steve Martin line just coming from Eddie Murphy, which was, would you be willing to cut your hair for the role? Would you be willing to cut your hair for the role? And he says, yeah, but it's usually better if someone else does it.
Yeah.
It just kills me every time. It's got to be his like it's got to be the Jif voice. Probably has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's so serious when he's answering. Like it's not even remotely occurring to him that's not what Bowfinger means.
Mm-hmm.
Like he sincerely answered, it's usually better if someone else does it. And then just his general response to, would you be willing to do a nude scene? I think it's that moment where he does the squinty thing, and then his eyes just open for a split second. That is just 2 minutes of perfect comedic glory. Is just audition. Oh God, my chest hurts from laughing right now. We talked. There's something I forgot to mention. Because we were talking about how scathing this is towards the different facets of Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be the soullessness or the full of shit producers, Mindhead. Apparently, Heather Graham's character is a diss towards Anne Heche.
Oh.
Which, if you thought the final joke with her came from out of nowhere, suddenly it makes sense now, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing too. What was always interesting about that joke was, whenever I would watch this, it was always like, I wonder why they didn't go the full mile and eventually just have her sleep with Christine Baranski too. Because she was the only one that didn't, and then of course they have the lesbian joke at the end, and it's like, all right, so you did eventually get there, and it's like, oh, it's the NH thing, of course. You were basically you were saving that.
I love how a movie that we talked about months ago, with Dodgeball doing it, like it was her girlfriend all along, And I love that Heather Graham literally just met her like at the premiere, which is literally the day before.
And we
like she met her while she was Kit's date.
Yeah, it was just like we didn't even mention that she went to the premiere with kids.
Yeah.
That's the thing too that I so appreciate about this movie. It's just the commitment to the jokes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's so many running jokes in this, and they land every time. It's like that goes also with every time Kit runs into Christine Baranski.
Mm-hmm.
Every time there's this perfect, clever wording where everything she says out of character sounds like to him that it's in the movie.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like if it was another writer, that would have stumbled at some point, or we would have said, "Oh God, that's reaching. Come on, he knows that she's not actually." But no, like every line I think works as much as it needs to sell that.
Yeah. Do you know what I wish we could have got with Bowfinger? There's a joke throughout the very beginning of The Office where Michael Scott is writing a movie called Threat Level Midnight. One of the episodes in season 7, right before he leaves, is just an entire episode of showing how Threat Level Midnight turned out. I wish Bowfinger had a special feature where we could watch Chubby Rain.
Yeah. That's the same like the Lethal Weapon episodes and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I keep wondering.
I think I also want it too because the Threat Level Midnight episode is one of my favorite Office episodes.
Because you know what I kind of love also is we see it from their perspective. From their perspective, it looks like a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Do we ever get a glimpse of Chubby Rain's reviews? I don't remember.
No.
I know there's a couple of things I keep asking you, despite how many times I've seen this movie. There's some things I was like, did I miss something? I can't quite remember.
I mean, it was good enough that Bowfinger got an offer to direct a movie in Taiwan.
and then when you see this movie, it's like, was that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah. I think that's supposed to tell us what the critical reception was.
And the fact that it's not a movie with Kit, it's a movie with Jeff.
Mm-hmm. It's essentially, how do I put this? Because I have an idea in my mind of what it's like, but the Kit for Jif substitution, there's nothing I can think of without it sounding mean. But let's see. All right. So essentially, Bowfinger has put himself in a Tarantino-like position where he has his gang that he uses, except it's like Tarantino got this big, huge A-list actress to do it, and her stand-in was Uma Thurman, and then he gets offered more movies with just Uma Thurman.
I'm sensing. I feel like there's a Zoe Bell reference here somewhere.
Zoe Bell, that's what I should have gone with. That's exactly the point of it. That's my point right there. I'm going to rephrase it. It's like he made this big movie that was a success with Uma Thurman, and Zoe Bell was her stunt double, and he gets greenlit to go make a movie with his gang, but he's got to go across the world. He's going to be one of the main characters in it, and then he gets Zoe Bell in it.
Which is really funny because Zoe Bell's been in, 4 of his movies since last time he worked with Uma?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that I always failed to question. Why the fuck is Bowfinger in the movie?
I don't know, but I love the scene of the movie. I'm assuming what we're seeing is a trailer or like a cold open or something. I don't know, but I love them. I don't know why, but it cracks me up when they run up to the ledge and then stop to slowly climb down.
And the dude that he doesn't even hit that does like 3 backflips.
Yeah. Oh, Jiff even getting to that little platform is a treat. But at the same time, it looks like it's super low budget. And then like all of the ninja extras come out of nowhere.
And they've apparently got a decent soundtrack.
Yeah.
There was a moment with Kit I forgot to mention that I only just noticed relatively recently. It's another one of those things that's just there that you just have to notice. It's when he like really, really freaks out, like right before he disappears for a while. And they have him hooked up to that machine. And he keeps saying, "She was after my gonads. She was coming after my gonads." Did you notice that the machine is just there, normal, but every time he says gonads, it reacts?
Yeah, it goes berserk. Wasn't that? No. Him going into Bowfinger chatting to John Cho about his location comes later, doesn't it?
Is it? Because is that the John Cho scene when they almost get caught?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can't remember. Why do we keep forgetting so many things about a movie we've seen so many times?
I don't know. I'm surprised when you were talking about all the scenes that throw shade at Hollywood. I'm surprised you didn't bring up the fact that a cop comes by and asks for papers, and they smooth it over by just letting him be in the movie.
I love this. I love the payoff for that too. That's also the payoff for Afron's little effect. I feel like that's the great thing about this. It introduces so many things, and I feel like they all find a way to come back somehow. Also, I keep wanting to say this, and I keep forgetting. Shout out to Christine Baranski, I think, for being really great in this. Also, when she's in Chubby Rain, is amazing. Like I want to see the entirety of that performance from her.
So you want what I want? Just a special feature, just Chubby Rains with it.
Yeah. Which of course will look really, really cheap, and then suddenly have a really, really produced last shot.
Yeah.
Also, did you this guy, especially since he's like playing his own brother, it was always weird to me. I think I noticed it most in the scene where he has to run across the street. Did you? Maybe it's just me, but when he's not wearing the glasses and he like scrunches up his face when he's playing Jeff, does he kind of look like Charlie, his own brother in real life?
I don't know. I don't really know what his brother looks like.
That's every time. For some reason, every time I see that highway scene in particular, that's the first thing that comes out. It's like, damn, he really looks like his. I mean, they already look alike anyway, but it's like, man, he really looks like Charlie in that scene. The late Charlie, unfortunately. So, yeah, and then, of course, the great joke where they just gather the random crew who's crossing the border, and they don't speak English at all. And by the end of the movie, they just miraculously speak English and know all of the camera lingo.
And they're all getting calls about work. Like this shittily shot movie was enough to get them jobs.
It's like that's kind of what we're going to
go. I also love how they covered their bases by not having the crew find out what Bowfinger's doing because they don't speak English.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like a perfect.
Like that's a good way to cover up a plot hole.
That's sort of like this. This is kind of where our first comparison will come in. Is it's really funny that a movie like Chubby Rain got all these people all this work in the same way that the movie within the movie in Orgazmo becomes one of the highest grossing movies of all time.
Yeah, it's like third.
But is there anything else about Bowfinger?
Not that I can think of. We touched on just about every aspect.
Yeah, because I mean, like every single beat of it, I feel like is funny. It's like we'd have to literally do every beat of the movie to talk about everything that works about it.
I love the fact that at the end, when he's talking to Terrence Stamp, essentially blackmailing, I didn't freeze. I just lost my train of thought.
I was trying to.
That'd be a good prank to pull, though. But I love that we just aren't told there's a video. We see the video. Because I love how he goes through the trouble of like putting a bag on his head and the way that it just goes down.
For some, I don't know. I guess it's the delivery. But
I believe, if I remember correctly, in that little video, he greets them by going, "Hey, Laker girls."
I don't know why it kills me so much that it's not funny. Hey, let us not forget that what is it? Ted Kennedy's voice he hears in his head that tells him he needs to do that.
Maybe.
You're getting progressively brighter as it goes on. It's like we're watching the sun rise off of you.
Oh, which is funny because it looks exactly the same outside as it did earlier.
All right. Do we move on to Orgazmo now?
I would say so.
This was probably the first NC-17 movie I saw. Would you probably say the same?
Maybe the only one I've seen.
We saw Killer Joe all in theaters.
I forgot Killer Joe was NC-17.
Yeah.
Killer Joe's on Hulu now. I thought about giving it another watch.
I wonder what it is, because what's interesting is the DVD is rated R and it's unrated.
Mm-hmm.
The rated cut is the NC-17 cut. But did me and you see this the same way the first time?
You'll have to enlighten me.
The first time I saw Orgazmo was, do you remember way back in the day? We're talking like 2003, 2004, maybe earlier than that, where you could download movies, but it took like 10 hours.
Yeah, you used like Kazaa.
Where you would download something, and then we would go to bed, and when we wake up, it'd be done downloading.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how I saw the first Fast and the Furious movie, and that's how I saw Orgazmo.
That's how you saw the first Fast and the Furious movie?
Yeah, it was a great copy. I thought like we were doing like wizard stuff. It's like how do we just have the movie now? Is this how this works?
Which is so funny because you are one of the biggest anti-streamers I've ever met.
Let's not open that up. But
got to get with the times, old man.
Which is funny because
you got to get off the 35 millimeter and go digital.
But which is funny because the reason we watched this so recently is because it's on Netflix now.
Mm-hmm. Netflix says you're welcome.
You have a physical copy of it, don't you?
I got it at the exchange. Because when I saw it, I was like, oh, shit.
I saw it at a flea market, but I ended up getting something else instead, so I still don't have it.
Bad form.
I know. But before we even go into it, there is something that comes to mind when I think of when we talk about how we were talking about how clever and witty Bowfinger was. Now we're talking about how we have to really dive into the stupid with this one.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
which we had to do the same thing with basketball.
Yeah, and like basketball, because these came out the same year, I believe, 98, I think.
I thought Orgazmo was 97.
I can't remember for sure. It's one of the. It was in that area.
I'll look it up while you're making your point. We have to have accuracy.
It might have been one of those ones where it had like maybe a festival run in '97 and then a full run in '98 or something like that. But obviously, critics are not going to take to a movie like this. And I had heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but I had heard his review specifically for Orgazmo is the reason there is a South Park episode called Roger Ebert Should Lay Off the Fatty Foods.
Oh, it's 97, by the way.
Okay. So, needless to say, a lot of people weren't willing to dive into the stupid that it takes to get any enjoyment out of a movie called Orgasm. Like, let's not even talk about the plot. Let's not even talk about what happens in it. You got to start at the title, okay? If you see this title and you're not willing to jump into it, you're probably not going to have a very good time. Or you're going to have a bad time, to quote their own show.
Mm-hmm.
When the movie starts with a joke like, the first thing we see is the Hollywood sign, and underneath the Hollywood sign, it still labels the location Hollywood. Like, that's the very first joke. And I appreciate that joke a lot. I really like that joke. But then, of course, we get into the dumb very, very fast. And the question is, number one, you can't always blame the audience and say they just weren't ready for dumb. You also have to do dumb well.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain degree. Like I said, we've talked about this before. Even if a movie looks really, really fucking stupid on its surface, if it's still funny and still works, there's something underneath the surface that's coming from clever writers. If they're able to make stupid consistently funny throughout.
Dumb and Dumber is like the blueprint for that.
Yeah.
Like, Dumb and Dumber is like the exact, like, if you want to do dumb and just dive it, this is how you do it while still looking clever.
Yeah. And I don't think Orgasmo is funny from beginning to end. I'm actually pretty far from thinking Orgasmo is funny from beginning to end.
Yeah. But
when it finds particular moments, there's gold here, absolutely. Like, and sometimes it's something that's just so minuscule. Actually, minuscule. The stupid stuff is so over the top here. I feel like that makes the minuscule stuff even funnier by comparison. And obviously, in total, funnier than the big stuff. Like, do you have an opinion on Bilbo? Bilbo is the guy that works on the porn shoot that's in charge of getting Trey Parker away. Basically, the bouncer of the set.
Okay.
I'd
forgotten his name.
When the director gets when we see the director for like the real monstrous person he's supposed to be, and he's like, kill them for disrupting my shoot. And his response is, okay. And it's like, the fact that he downplays it so much, the way he says okay to kill them is so much funnier than when he actually takes action.
I also love how I think it's the same scene where he's told to cut their balls off and he just goes to the door. He's like, sir, I'm going to cut your balls off.
And when they talk about like what they're there for, they're going door to door. And when Bilbo goes back to report, he's like, it's some guys from Jesus. It's like Bilbo is gold until they make him start fighting. It's like, why couldn't Bilbo have just been the okay guy? Or the polite guy that says, I'm going to have to cut your balls.
I do love right before they get to his house, though. I love the unexpected. Like, now it's kind of predictable because it's a joke that's been done to death. But I still love how quickly the old lady turns on them.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is one of those jokes that you can see coming from a mile away, yet somehow it is still funny anyway.
Mm-hmm. What do you think works more often than not? When they pull that joke with an elderly person or when they pull that joke with a child? Which do you think lands better usually? Because I tend to lean toward the elderly person.
Yeah, I think the elderly thing got really played out when Betty White's performance in Lake Placid got popular.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's an example before that, but that's the first one that comes to mind. I feel like it's in a lot of circumstances it's more unexpected from a child,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, also a lot with a child it feels a bit forced.
Mm-hmm.
It feels forced regardless, but
One of my favorite deliveries of it with a child, I can't even remember what movie it comes from. But somebody says something to a child. The child just responds with, "Fuck you, lady," and then just keeps walking. I can't think what movie that was.
it's from Demolition Man.
That's it.
When she's talking about like the overall damage just for one child, and the kid's like, "Fuck you!" Like,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
yeah,
That's probably one of my favorite uses of it.
But there's also another joke in this that feels like it should get played out because it's one joke through the whole movie, and it's not as good at pulling that off as Bowfinger is. But while it has lulls because it does become a tired joke, it'll just reach these little tiny moments of gold suddenly. Like the idea of the whole movie being surrounded by the fact that Trey Parker's character is a Mormon and he's being put in a porn and he's against everything and has to basically cope or find his way around the content.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they can do that. The setup can be funny, but then they try the joke again and they expand on it, and it's like, well, yeah, it's the same joke. Yeah, it's the same joke. But then
They also commit, forgive the pun, because he's a Mormon, they also commit a cardinal sin. And we've talked about this movie before. He tries to do the same thing that the man with two brains did.
Yeah.
With the show me a sign.
We talked about it in that video where it was like, I can get that it's an homage to it, but they basically just lifted the joke. That's all they did.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's almost better in The Man with Two Brains because you would think the person lifting the joke would try to make it bigger and expand on it, but it's more over the top in The Man with Two Brains.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's even a spirit screaming, "No!" Oh, but talking about them doing that same joke, every now and then just one line will just click and be hilarious. Like when they're telling Trey Parker to do something really vulgar, and his response is, "How would Christ benefit from that?" And it's like, yes, you made the joke work. I would have thought it was very interesting because obviously they did this after Cannibal.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I read this was also supposed to be a musical at one point.
Wouldn't mind seeing that.
But apparently it was the case of the movie was hard enough to sell as is,
Mm-hmm.
let alone adding musical to the things going on in this movie.
Do you feel like this movie, honestly, would have been easier to sell now than it was then?
This is it's funny that it's there now. This is probably something Netflix would have picked up or
Mm-hmm.
something.
or Amazon Prime.
Yeah, because there's also actually talking about lifting things. Going back to that, there is something else that I found interesting. The whole subplot with the restaurant. Does that seem like out of place?
Kinda, but I love when they're beating up I can't remember his name. Is it G Fresh? That's his name, G Fresh, I think. When they're beating him up, the obvious shots of them throwing a mannequin at the wall. Like, I don't know if that's intentional or if that's just low-budget filmmaking.
I was wondering about that because the same thing when the mansion blows up at the end, how it's so obviously a miniature burning.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me that takes me back to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia again. But it's the Lethal Weapon episode where Charlie's the henchman with the long blonde hair and he gets thrown out the window, and it's this very obvious Charlie dummy that just flies out and hits the ground and gets run over. It's like, if the joke is that it's obvious, it's hilarious because it's especially obvious when they slam him through the glass, and then he's got like that little scratch on it, and that's it. Because don't they even call attention to that? He's like, dude, what happened to you? That scratch looks really bad.
Yeah. I like to feel like the Orgazmo is a movie that Bobby Bowfinger would try to get off the ground.
Yeah, at the absolute.
Not the movie within the movie itself.
I was gonna say like at his peak desperation. Also mentioning, this was the introduction to DVDA, which, by the way, the reason I bring that up is because that is also the name of that band that Trey Parker sings in, that you've probably heard. They did the song in the car in Basketball that's talking about all of his problems.
Yeah, and he also does the song over the end credits, I believe.
Yeah, and I think they do.
The end credits of Orgazmo.
Yeah, which is also the opening credits song.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious, by the way.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna use this phrase because I know you love this phrase. That song kind of slaps.
Most of theirs actually kind of do. They do the end credit song for the South Park movie. I'm pretty sure they do all the Team America songs.
Probably.
Like America.
So can we make an assumption that the band itself just kind of slaps?
And while we're on the topic of Trey Parker's voice, I don't know why this is so funny and why it works so well, but the actress that they call T-Rex, the fact that is so obviously Trey Parker's voice dubbed over,
yeah,
makes me laugh so fucking hard, and I don't know why.
And I love that the giveaway is it's like, oh, that sounds like something that'd be on South Park.
Yeah, because I believe the first thing that's said when T-Rex walks in is, "Hi, fellas," in that very Trey Parker voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like all the background South Park characters.
Yeah.
So, should we talk about another key character in this? That would be.
Are you going with Dave?
Oh, no, but we can talk about Dave.
No, let's go with another key character. We'll come back to Dave.
I was going to say, Dave is another one of those characters where he's the same joke. But I think it's because Matt Stone really knows how to deliver a line.
Yeah.
That every time Dave is the same joke, it's funnier. Like, it kind of reminds me of the Peter Graves joke in Airplane.
Yeah, I could see
like
that.
It keeps coming back. It's the same joke, but there's a slight variation every time, and it's funny every time.
We've done so many videos. Have we ever talked about Airplane?
I have, but I'd be willing to redo that video.
I love Airplane so much. I love it so much. Airplane, there's been so many times that Airplane has been the movie of choice to go on in the background. Because I know anytime I look up from whatever I'm doing, I'm going to witness hilarity.
Yeah, I did an Airplane video I did a versus with Hot Shots. But I do feel like Airplane is the kind of movie that would be better if we both kind of talk about it, especially since we were supposed to see it in a theater I think this month or last month, and for obvious reasons that
Oh
didn't.
yeah, I forgot our
So,
airplane outing got roned.
so it would make sense if we just talked about Airplane at some point.
Yeah.
But
Gosh,
yeah,
it's funny.
yeah, the other character I was going to go to, of course, was Dion Bahar, who is I think Ben is his character name.
Shoulda
Who is,
boy.
who is yeah, who is of course best known for playing Squeak in basketball.
Yeah.
Um, has some pretty great moments here. One in particular, it's not even him; it's his character. But I still love playing with him. I love when they're first around his invention, and
Mm-hmm.
they do the rich guy laugh.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that scene is really funny to me. it just works as a standalone, just by itself. just them doing the rich guy laugh.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one moment in particular about Ben the character that just kills me. And I'm hoping you remember it because it's so brief. It's so brief. It's a moment that you may have recognized, but you didn't really think much about it, or it didn't really stick with you.
Hmm.
And once again, I don't know why. It's just one of those things that just gets me in a certain way every single time, and I am on the floor laughing. It's after they decide they're going to do their own superhero thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I thought it was interesting at first when you first suggested Super to go with it. I was thinking about the porn stuff. I completely forgot there's a whole section of the second half of the movie where they just go out on their own trying to do actual superhero shit, which is very super. But it's the moment when they run out of the club and they get back in the car, and Ben flips over the car. It's so quick and so brief, and no attention is drawn to it. And he makes like a little sound when he does it. He like calls out when he flips over the car. It's one of those moments where I was glad it was on Netflix, because I did the thing where you can hit the go back 10 seconds button.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it like 4 times. Oh God. And
This is when I wish copyright infringement wasn't a thing, because I would love to like be able to like show that clip as a visual. I also love when they decide at the end to go help. I think her name's Lisa, Joe's fiance. And he's like, to the Chotomobile, and Trey Parker's like, what? And he's like, my Buick Century. And we get like the action cuts of Buick Century.
And it's like, this is where stupid is perfect.
Yeah. I just love the intense shots of Buick Century.
Oh. And then, yeah, we were talking about with Bowfinger about how it's a great joke in itself, that because it's one thing, like it could have been a whole plot point. It could have been a whole Boogie Nights-esque plot point,
Mm-hmm.
where it became like one of the most popular movies in porn history, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
I love the continued joke that Orgazmo, the movie within the movie, transcended its genre and became the third highest grossing movie of all time. And that whole plot point is pretty downplayed. We just see the director reading a magazine, and it says like Star Wars, Jaws, Orgasm.
Yeah.
And then it's playing in the same theater as E.T. and Citizen Kane.
Yeah, I love that it escalates to that point, because they could have just stopped at the joke where, like, at the first night of it at the porn theater, there's just a few people outside. Then there's more people. Then it's around the block. But I also love that we upgrade its theater.
Yes, isn't there a whole cut devoted to it's in a bigger theater than E.T. and Citizen Kane?
Mm-hmm. I think I think on the marquee, it's also like the headliner with E.T. and Citizen Kane under it.
Yeah. I will say, and you were talking about dramatic cuts. Another dramatic cut that I kind of love, that's just in there very briefly, is at the very end when he rips the tape off of her mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And we get the sort of trademark exterior shot hearing a scream.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only for like a second, and it's for a moment that just really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
All the drama is over, and we get that.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've been saying, there's also some stuff about Orgazmo that doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like especially when you look at like South Park and stuff like that, there is an underlying like smart factor to it. Like we were talking about, where there's always a sign that somebody smart is making a movie that is intentionally dumb. But I don't see much of like a sort of cleverness underneath it all. It's like you really, really have to do it. Like there's moments in Bowfinger that are a perfect combination. Well, clever and witty as Bowfinger is, yeah, there's some moments in it that are like really stupid also. But they're so perfectly executed, they just all blend together. And it's like, I wonder what kind of movie Orgazmo would been if it was more clever rather than just going all in on the stupid. I mean, maybe there's something in like the box office jokes and stuff like that, but it does all feel very blatant because it's also Orgazmo is incredibly dependent on one particular joke that is never funny,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really, really dependent on it through the whole movie.
Which is?
Trey Parker was really banking on the sight of a dildo being funny.
Oh,
and I can take that back. There is one joke involving a dildo that's fucking hilarious, but it's the only dildo joke in it that works. And this is a movie that's wall-to-wall dildo jokes. Do you remember the one dildo joke that I think might be, that you might think I think is one of the funniest, probably one of the funniest jokes in the movie?
No.
But it's the only dildo joke that works. How Chota Boy has that one on his head that sticks up.
Mm-hmm.
And we get that one shot in the video store of her seeing the movie within the movie. And they're like, all right, let's hide behind this wall. And they duck behind the wall, and the dildo's just sticking. This movie is wall-to-wall dildo jokes. And I think that's the only one that actually works. But yeah, and then of course it gets very over the top when it tries to have a plot and become an action movie of sorts, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There's the weird hamster thing. So yeah, do you have anything else on Orgazmo?
Do you think it's a case that movie might have just been made 10 years too early? Like 2007, Trey Parker could have made more of it work than 1997 Trey Parker?
Yeah, because he was still pretty early. Like he had made Cannibal, which is kind of a stroke of genius. Cannibal is, but he was still like, I think South Park was still in really early stages. He was just in a general very early stage of his career.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do wonder with like maybe 10 years of extra time what it would look like. Like I said, maybe it would have that sort of clever layer. I do think it's ultimately missing just a little bit.
See, I could also see the reverse happening. Like, I see the movies that have been made since it, and there's a lot of dumb shit that probably could have got thrown in there. It could have made it work less.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's a lot of people that think that, mainly they're critics, that think they do too much. Like, there's a lot of people that hate Team America. Because Team America, funny as it is, feels like they just tried everything.
Mm-hmm.
And when you try everything, that can be really risky. You can get something great, kind of like, it's a weird example, especially from where it comes from. But like when I think of something like The Wolf of Wall Street, like if you look at The Wolf of Wall Street as a comedy, which it basically is, that's a movie where they threw in just about every possible thing they could. I throw Sausage Party in there also, but apparently that's a controversial opinion. So, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that Sausage Party is aging as well in my mind as it was when I first saw it, and how much I appreciated that they just went for everything. So it's like it is hard to tell if Trey Parker made this, 10 years after the fact, or maybe even now, if he would be able to find that clever line that he's certainly capable of, or if it would have been another case of them just throwing everything and seeing what happened.
Yeah.
Because it feels like they kind of already went. Because like we were talking about how like the scenes like with Bilbo, when he just kind of delivers his lines, and how just that's funny in itself. But it feels like this movie's main target was to go big. But his main target was us getting to the hamster scene, or when they're fighting people and all of that. But yeah, it's an interesting balance, I guess you could say. Do you have anything else to add?
No, that was really the only thing I thought about was how that movie would look today versus back then. Bowfinger, I think, is perfectly placed where it is.
Yeah, and I still don't think people appreciate it enough.
Not enough people go back and watch it.
Yeah, that needs to happen. So it turned
Justice for Jiff. And it has nothing to do with any wrongness that he got in the movie. It's just no one's watching the movie. Jiff needs justice.
Yeah, except for the part where he's running across the street. Jiff spends the whole movie pretty pleased with himself.
Yeah.
I love that shot of them at the premiere also, because it's like Jiff and Kid are so different. It's like you almost, even though they're both Eddie Murphy, he plays both parts so perfectly and so differently. You almost can't even imagine those two characters being part of the same family. And then it's like legitimately touching that Jiff was sitting with him at the premiere instead of the shitty seats.
Yeah. It was a joke that was used in the preview, but a joke like, this is my avid Blockbuster or avid renter at Blockbuster moment in the movie. I love his reaction when Heather Graham takes off her top.
I think I may have read that was also ad-lib. Which leads to the question, I don't know how the fuck nobody broke.
Yeah.
It's like I feel the way about that I feel about the scenes that Trey Parker and Matt Stone have together in Orgazmo. And there's a gag reel to prove this for Orgazmo. Pretty much any time Trey Parker and Matt Stone have a scene together in Orgazmo, it cuts to something else really fast because they could not stop breaking. Whenever Matt Stone said one of his lines.
I don't know how anybody survives making a comedy. I don't know how comedy movies get out there, especially really good ones.
Yeah, same goes for shows too. When you watch the gag reels for Seinfeld, and it's like I don't know how anybody that's worked with Julia Louis-Dreyfus has gotten through. But as we said a couple of videos ago, she even played on herself with that in the outtakes for A Bug's Life, where her character is the same way.
Yeah.
All right. So is that this?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's pretty clear for the purists that want to know which one's better. I think it's pretty clear.
I would certainly hope so. So we're not necessarily saying always take clever over stupid, but when there's a certain balance, that's a really good place to be. So yeah, we talked about another one we were going to do. Is that just going to be the next one, or did you have something else in mind, or?
Which one are you referring to?
It would be us going back to Disney.
Could probably make that work.
Because we have a few things. There's one video I want us to do soon that will be coming out at the beginning of September. When I'm getting started back into the Stephen King stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I want to see how many of those I can get you involved in. And then we're doing a whole separate King thing that's not related to the novella thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've thrown around a few things also. So, yeah, I'm guessing we'll decide off camera what exactly the next one will be and when. So, yeah. So, are we done here?
I think so.
All right.